11:17 on the clock. Thank you for joining us on WFAA Plus. I'm Mark Istook, and 1:17 would be more accurate. Morgan Young.
And I'm Morgan Young. We are coming on air this afternoon as rallies get underway across North Texas in protest of some government policies.
That's right. Several protests across North Texas, including in Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, and Denton. And these are in addition to the ones going on across the nation. We're talking more than 2,000 rallies planned, all part of the No Kings movement.
Yeah, the mobilization is a direct response to President Trump's military parade in Washington, D.C. in celebration of the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. It also coincides with the president's 79th birthday.
Want to check in with the rally taking place in downtown Dallas today in front of City Hall. Rebecca Lopez is live there, and I noticed, Rebecca, you had a hat on a little bit ago. You took it off for the cameras. I appreciate that. You're trying to stay cool as things are heating up today.
It is very hot out here, and in fact, they've had several medical emergencies, and they are now marching. They have taken off to march, and the organizers got up here and they said, listen, there's 3 things that we need to tell you. If you are hot right now and you feel like you're going to pass out, don't march. And there's a halfway point where there's a water station, so if you make it that far, you get some water. And then the third thing that they said that's the most important thing is we are peaceful. They said be loud, but peaceful, and that is the message that they're really trying to get to these protesters. And so there are 3 different groups that are represented here. They did get permits from the city of Dallas in order to be able to march in the streets. You do have to have a permit. These protesters did go through the proper process to get those permits, and that's why they're being allowed to march through the streets, and they've got a route, and they give them those routes so that DPD knows which way they're going so they can stay safe. They will have officers along the way. They've got undercover officers in the crowd as well, but there are, sharpshooters stationed along the route. They've got the Dallas Command Staff is actually, I could see them a little while ago. They're up in City Hall inside one of the offices that looks down on the crowd. There are officers on standby nearby, ready in case they need to jump in. But again, they said, listen, we want to prove Governor Greg Abbott wrong, and that is that we are peaceful. We are not here to cause chaos or civil unrest. So they keep saying that to the people. Prove the governor wrong. There's no need for DPS troopers or National Guard because we are peaceful. And there are thousands. I've covered a lot of marches in my career here at WFAA, and I've never seen such a diverse crowd. A little while ago, the organizers, when we were off camera, asked, how many of you are first-time protesters? And I would say 75% of this crowd started cheering, and I talked to one person that said, this is the first time I have ever protested, but I feel that what is happening in America right now, I need to not be complicit. He said to be complicit is to go along with what is happening. So that seems to be what a lot of people out here are doing. There are elderly people here. It's a really young crowd as well. There are people representing the LGBTQ community. There are people from Latino groups, Black Lives Matter, just a whole coalition of protesters here. And again, right now they're marching. DPD was obviously got drones up as well through the crowds, making sure that everyone stays peaceful, and also that they don't need medical assistance. There's a lot of Dallas Fire Rescue also along the route to help people. So that's what's going on here. A little while ago, we also heard from Paula Poundstone. She gave a very fiery message, and funny, obviously, she's a comedian, so she was a little funny, getting the crowd riled up, saying, look, I don't like Texas, it's really hot here, and things like that. But she said that she had been protesting in LA, and she felt it was important to be here today to fight for what she said is democracy at risk. So here she is, and we have some sound that we'll play for you a little bit later on. But that's what's happening out here, you guys.
And Rebecca, we want to keep you here just for a second. You're talking about the energy of this crowd and really the sentiment of wanting to keep this demonstration about the cause that they're out here for. I know you've been out there for a bit, and you've been, working on this all week. Can you speak to more, just give us more of an idea as well about the energy here and what people's message is here, and what, if anybody's watching from home, what they want people to take from this demonstration?
Well, I think that there's just a variety of causes. People feel that in some cases their voice is not being heard, that they don't have freedom of speech. If you speak out, you'll be targeted. They are concerned about what is happening with immigration specifically and the raids that are going on. And I was talking a little earlier with Mark and talking about the president somewhat seems like he's shifting a little bit and saying that there's some new rules coming out about the ICE raids in hotels and farms because they believe that immigrants are essential to the workforce. They are hard workers, many of them. They are out there in the strawberry fields and the grape fields. They are working in restaurants. They are working in meatpacking plants and those type of things. And if you deport them all, who is going to do that work? And that seems to be resonating with the president because it seems like he is asking them to pause those raids for a little while. But despite that, people here say a lot of damage has already been done. Some people that are Americans, some people that are here with green cards that are in the country legally have been swept up in this message that Trump is saying, we've got to deport all the criminals and all the rapists and all the violent people. Well, that's always been happening. I've covered crime for many, many years. They've always arrested violent criminals and held them in the jail on ICE holds and then deported them after they did their time or if they were found innocent. So that's always happened in America. Criminals have never just been allowed to be in this area of Dallas, violent criminals running around loose. It's not a sanctuary city, never has been a sanctuary city. So that's the big cause that people are most upset about, I think, is what is happening with immigration, Morgan.
Well, and I'm curious, Rebecca, you have such a unique perspective into this because of your connections with law enforcement, but, ostensibly this is by and large protests from folks who did not support the president, but anecdotally, we are hearing from quite a few Trump supporters who are business owners and have had some of their workers rounded up in some of these raids, both here in North Texas and across the country. And there was a report commissioned by the state of Texas comptroller a number of years ago that made the case that, by and large, some of the undocumented workers were a net positive, a net benefit to the state. And I think you're seeing some bigger questions about some of these policies. And I'm just curious if you're feeling any sense of bipartisanship on the ground at the rally today?
Not really, but people here are just going to say that they can continue to be loud about this issue. I just have to pause for a second because I hear a very popular song, El Rey, which means the king, being played. It's Vicente Fernandez. He was a very, very, very famous singer in Mexico, and El Rey is almost like the national anthem, an unofficial national anthem of Mexico, and they are playing it a while ago, but everybody around here has signs that say no kings, and obviously that is the theme of today, no kings, people feeling like the President Trump is acting like a king, and so that is why they are out here protesting. Now back to the question that you asked me when it comes to do they feel a shift so far? They haven't seen it yet because there were continue to be ICE raids in some of those very places that the President has said they were backing off of even yesterday. So the people from LULAC and United Farmers of America, those big civil rights groups, Latino groups that have been fighting for the rights of farmers and immigrants for years, are out here in force as well, wanting to make sure that those immigrants are protected. It's interesting because historically, if you look back at the migrant worker, migrants have been very essential to our economy. And when they have had huge raids, I've looked at some studies. There were some studies recently put out by LULAC, the United Latin American Citizens. They basically said that when you raid these places and you get rid of these essential workers, that the economy hurts. And so that is, I think, something that President Trump might be seeing as well, that this would be harmful to the economy if he continues to deport people that are essential to the workforce. Back to you.
Well, Rebecca, I appreciate your continued perspective there on the ground in downtown Dallas, and we will check in with you again in just a bit. But she brought up an interesting point, Morgan, that, I remember hearing a podcast that was talking about some of the issues that we are seeing now perhaps ironically may be a result of attempts to close the border, where if you had a free flow of some of the migrant workers who come to the States to work in the agriculture industry, et cetera, the ability to go back home meant you might not end up staying here. And it's the staying here for many people that has led to the call for the mass deportations.
Absolutely. And, Rebecca was talking about, we're still taking a live look at this crowd here. She spoke to the diversity of this crowd. She has covered so many protests. And we're getting a better idea of the magnitude, that's the size of this crowd. We just got new information from the city of Dallas saying that the crowd size is estimated to be about 3,000 people.
Okay.
And, you heard Rebecca saying that she estimated maybe 75% of the people responded when asked if this was their first time protesting. So when you think about all the factors you just talked about, what Rebecca was talking about, and the way people are so impassioned about this, the number of people and the number of people who are coming out to voice their concerns for the first time in this way.
Well, and for folks who are just now catching up with us here on WFAA Plus, or if you maybe watched this earlier today and you heard us talk about keeping people out of the roadways, these protesters, per Rebecca Lopez, do have permits with the city of Dallas to march. So just wanted to make sure we were clear about that, because one of the concerns was stopping traffic. The just additional exposure you have to risk factors when you've got people on the move, obviously getting away from a contained area can lead to some problems with law enforcement, some problems with potential conflicts. And because of the aerial we're getting now on the marchers, that number that you just gave us a minute ago, I wouldn't be surprised if it swelled, because this looks like more than 3,000 people.
Absolutely. And we've been keeping our coverage here in Dallas, but we know that these protests and demonstrations are happening across our area. I believe we have Adriana de Alba, who is covering demonstrations in downtown Fort Worth.
Yeah, Adriana, you were at Burke-Burnett Plaza, and we know that they hadn't started marching. We're seeing them march in Dallas. Any signs that might happen in Fort Worth?
Hey, Mark and Morgan. Well, not at this point. So the last time we talked to you, we were on the other side of the park, along the street, and that crowd has grown bigger. We did make our way across the park just to get a different vantage point, and I'll tell you, it is packed in there. The last time I saw you, I told you I didn't know that there was a stage or any speakers. There is. It was so loud that we did not know there was a stage set up and there were speakers at the time. So now we have a different vantage point. We're on the other side. We'll kind of show you what we're seeing. That middle section of the park, that is where the stage is set up, and there have been speakers, loud chanting. So that's where you'll see a big chunk of people gathered. But I'll tell you, as we pan around, there are large crowds surrounding every corner of this park. And they are chanting at every car that comes by. If I had to guess, I'd say there are several thousand here. I did check it with Fort Worth PD just a bit ago. I was told that this protest in particular is not expected to march. They were not permitted for that, but there was also a separate march planned for today in Fort Worth. It was called the March of Dissent. And those are they were dressed as handmaids, if you've seen the show Handmaid's Tale, and they were kind of going around Fort Worth. Now, Fort Worth PD told me that if this crowd joins the March of Dissent, then it becomes a march. But right now, as planned, it is not supposed to be a march. I also have observed it's been pretty peaceful. We haven't seen any issues. We saw one minor scuffle between two men earlier, but it quickly fizzled out, and it didn't escalate into anything bigger. Fort Worth PD did confirm to me that they have had no arrests and no citations here today. So this protest is actually supposed to wrap at 2. So I'd say in about another half hour, and we'll monitor and see how this clears out. But it has been peaceful. We've seen different groups show up here today. It was interesting. Rebecca mentioned that she's meeting a lot of people who said they've been out for the first time in protest, and I've met those folks as well too. I talked to the man who said, I'm out here because I feel there is nothing else I can do. I don't know what else we can do at this point. And so people feel strongly that they want to be out today, joining this nationwide protest and voicing their concern their concern against the current administration and the administration's policies. A range of issues, as we've discussed. It's not just immigration, it's cuts to federal programs, cuts to jobs, the proposed cuts to the wealthy in this country, proposed tax cuts. So just a lot of issues bringing people out today. We have observed signs with a lot of young people saying, I am the mother, or, sorry, I'm the daughter or son of an immigrant. We've seen veterans come out here in force today. So just a very, very large, diverse group, I would say, out here today. And again, this will wrap at 2. We've kind of started to see some movement where people are beginning to leave a little bit early, but just very loud, very crowded. But again, it has been peaceful here in downtown Fort Worth. One other thing I wanted to mention, if we could cue up Arlington, because we were in Arlington earlier today, and they had a pretty large crowd there too. I will say we saw a lot of seniors out, so you can see both sides of a road in Arlington were packed with people rallying, and that was peaceful as well. The organizer there told me that Arlington Mayor Jim Ross actually came out as well. And there were no National Guard in Arlington. Fort Worth PD have also told me that they do not know of any or have not seen any National Guard positioned here in Fort Worth either. And so that is the message out of downtown Fort Worth and Arlington. The protests, the rallies, they have been peaceful this afternoon.
And Adriana, here's hoping they stay that way. Thank you for that coverage from downtown Fort Worth. And again, I want to reissue just a blanket heads up for our viewers today. We're doing the best we can to try to avoid any of the signs that may have inappropriate language, but we've seen a couple sneak through. Hopefully, if you didn't have your glasses on, maybe you missed them, but we're trying to avoid those today. But luckily, most of the ones that we've seen have been safe for TV and family safe, and you do see a lot of families out there. Morgan, I do feel like this is happening in the midst of what we're seeing out of Minnesota today. ABC News reporting a couple of legislators there shot and killed, and a alleged list recovered from a gunman targeting state representatives. I think this underscores how volatile the political climate in the United States is right now, which is why even more so you want to see protests and rallies like this today here in North Texas and across the country be safe events.
And to piggyback on that, absolutely. And I think that makes it so significant what Rebecca was saying when she was hearing the people who are demonstrating saying they want to prove a point in being peaceful. They want to prove a point that we are not the way that we have been described. We are not going to prove this person right who said this about us. And I think it's important to note, these are the demonstrations that are going on now, but across North Texas, earlier today, there were demonstrations in Denton, Euless, Frisco, McKinney, and we know that those cities have confirmed with us just in the past few hours that all of those demonstrations, even the ones that ended, those were peaceful as well. No reports, no citations in those cities.
I heard the planning call from the No Kings protest folks, at least here locally, and they were really stressing we don't want any encounters with law enforcement, really want to keep this as clean as possible. And that's certainly what Governor Greg Abbott was wanting as well. He spoke earlier this week about activating the National Guard ahead of these protests and those demonstrations against the Trump administration's immigration policies. We know that we're talking 5,000 National Guardsmen, 2,000 state police as well, helping local law enforcement. But again, the view we're getting from our chopper is that this has been a peaceful march, and so far no issues. We're hoping that's the case across the country today.
We want to make sure that what has happened in California does not happen in Texas. Texas is a law and order state, and we will use every tool that we can to ensure order across our state.
So already in San Antonio, we saw those officers and guardsmen deployed. They had a protest on Wednesday. That demonstration was peaceful, but the mayors in San Antonio and Austin both said they did not ask for the governor to mobilize the National Guard in their cities.
And we do want to take a live look at crowds that are gathering in Washington, D.C., checking out some of the military equipment and helicopters that will be a part of tonight's parade. You know, these protests, again, are in response to the military parade happening in Washington, D.C. this evening. Again, it is to mark the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army and Flag Day. This event is expected to include more than 6,000 soldiers, 50 helicopters, M1 Abrams battle tanks, as well as possibly 200,000 attendees and heightened security to match.
Yeah, there are quite a few events scheduled in the nation's capital before that parade, including a wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery and some performances by the Army's Band and Drill Team 2. Also, some public recognition for Medal of Honor recipients. That parade kicks off at 5:30 our time. It'll be followed by a concert at the Ellipse and fireworks over the national monuments. Of course, we'll be streaming that right here on WFAA Plus this evening. One of the issues that led to the No Kings protest were reports that President Trump had wanted this parade to occur on his birthday, a celebration of him that was very militaristic. And I think it's no matter which side of the aisle you're on, you can understand that the optics of that get a bit tricky.
Absolutely, because we know, separate from the military parade is something that people. It's a wonderful event. It's a beautiful event. It's a celebration of our military. So I think, for a lot of people, you talked about the tension right now, the tension and of our political climate, kind of taking something that can be so sacred and kind of pulling it into that is a little bit difficult.
Well, this is happening on Flag Day, by the way, and I mentioned before it was my sister's birthday today, so happy birthday, Nancy. But again, a celebration of patriotism today, slightly different than the July 4th celebration we've got coming up in a few weeks, but it was on this date 250 years ago that the Army was first commissioned. So again, the 250th Army birthday is really what that big parade in Washington, D.C. is about, and here's hoping that they get all the focus and attention that they deserve as they get set for that parade there at 5:30 tonight. I know there were some concerns about storms in that area if the weather would derail those plans. I haven't gotten an updated forecast lately, but here's hoping that everybody's able to stay safe there, as we are seeing here in downtown Dallas as well.
And I think we're getting that live look here, and if we're able to kind of paint a picture, this is such a large crowd. The city of Dallas estimating about 3,000 people. You were saying, just taking a look at it, probably much more than that.
I tried counting, I kept losing count, so I kept getting stuck at 6. I had to start back over again. Yeah.
But if you are unfamiliar with downtown Dallas, we want to paint a picture of where we are now. You can see the front of this demonstration appears to be coming up to the steps that are right outside of City Hall. And you can see they're coming up there, and Rebecca was talking about the diversity and the energy of this crowd, and we've seen different demonstrations in the city. This is a large turnout.
It is, and when you hear from Rebecca again that, and Adriana kind of backed this up, a substantial number of the protesters said this is the first time they've ever either attended an event like this, been to a protest, taken part in a march. And if that really is the case, that you've got a lot of folks who have never done it before, that would explain why you'd be seeing some of the numbers there.
Yeah, and you think about, we saw Rebecca before she was on camera. She had her hat, her fan. We were outside earlier. It's hot outside. So, just to state the obvious, excuse me for that, to be out here, we were talking about the elderly being out here and to be so impassioned and to come out and demonstrate in the middle of the afternoon. That kind of tells you something.
Well, you're seeing on the screen 90 degrees is that temperature, and I'm looking at our website at WFAA.com. I'm getting a feels like temperature of 103 when you factor in the heat index. Of course, the humidity there makes it feel a lot warmer than it is. Not much of a breeze today, and we did hear medics called out earlier when Rebecca was on camera, and one of the concerns today was heat stroke. Were people properly hydrated? Were they able to withstand the temperatures there? Because look, it's June in Texas, and it has felt unseasonably cool so far this summer. But unseasonably cool in Texas is still pretty hot.
It is, and Texas is going to Texas every time. We know that, speaking of the medical emergencies, that was something that came, I believe, out of the city of McKinney when we were asking about their demonstrations this morning. Earlier today, they said, they had no issues or arrests, but they did have a few medical emergencies. So to kind of reiterate what Rebecca was saying, the warning was from, officials out there. Yes, come out and demonstrate, but if you are sensitive to the heat, if you're having a hard time, maybe sit this one out.
Well, some of the cities had their events kick off this morning. Arlington was 10 o'clock. Chris Ottega was in Frisco at 10. So maybe some folks wanted to get out and beat the heat. But you're seeing these staggered throughout the day, and I imagine that was probably intentional by organizers to really get them as much coverage as possible. If you have all these rallies at one time, it concentrates the focus perhaps, but I think they wanted to spread them throughout the day. Although they are not planning any for the Washington, D.C. area. They did not want to counter program, they said, other than to use this date coincidentally to raise awareness about their message.
And then again, if you are just joining us now, this is a live look at the No Kings rally and demonstration, a march. It's turned to a march in downtown Dallas. And when we were looking at Fort Worth, Adriana said at this point it's not scheduled to be a march. They're kind of staying put, but we are seeing in Dallas this group is moving. And we saw the front of the group a couple of minutes ago, and they were approaching the steps of City Hall. Not sure if they're stopping there, if they're continuing to go, but you can see from our chopper, we're just continuing to follow this group of, more than, we're assuming, 3,000 people who have shown up to demonstrate today.
And again, Rebecca, when we caught up with her earlier, you saw a wide range of ages represented, a pretty diverse group of people. The signs that we've seen most of, I think, at least from our vantage point, seem to indicate protests against immigration enforcement, which we've seen ramp up, at least publicly, in recent weeks. And again, this was an issue that President Trump campaigned on. He was very clear about the idea of mass deportations. It was something that he promised to his supporters, and people cheered him on. And you're seeing this happen publicly across the country, and you're seeing some situations where you've got some folks that are citizens getting rounded up, and at some point I think you're seeing some of these people say, this isn't what I want. Now, whether or not they voted for him, I think that's why many of them are out there today, although that's just one of, I think, many issues that these protesters are trying to raise awareness about.
And it's interesting you say that, Mark, because there are so many people who on the other side of that will say, this isn't what you want, but this was the promise, that this was going to happen, maybe not exactly looking this way, but the things that we're seeing, you just said it, this was what this campaign was run on. This was a major issue. So when we see kind of the fallout of that, that was a promise fulfilled.
Well, it is Pride Month. It is June, and I've seen a number of pride flags displayed today as well. That is another issue that protesters have brought up, pushing for LGBTQ rights. So you have a variety of perspectives represented today, but we are looking at the live helicopter view in downtown Dallas. I believe I heard from our producer that we wanted to get out to Fort Worth, and Adriana, is that right? So we caught up with her earlier this morning in Arlington. She's been out in Fort Worth at Burke-Burnett Plaza for quite a while, and you finally caught up to the stage where the speakers were, Adriana, but were you able to hear any of their messages?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of the same messages throughout the day, including on this stage. This is what democracy looks like. No ICE, stop the fascism. Those are some of the things that people have said. There are now people beginning to march at the park, but we've not seen them leave the park. It seems to me like they're kind of just marching around the park. And so I'll kind of show you, if you can pan Cody to the right, you'll see a group just kind of going around the outside of the park. We're not seeing them on the street. And again, I checked in with Fort Worth PD earlier. They did tell me that they have not had any arrests or citations, no issues to report here in Fort Worth yet today. And so again, people are not expected to march through downtown here in Fort Worth, but if we see something different, of course, we will let you know. But it was interesting to me, the diversity and the size of the crowds at both marches. I do want to bring your attention to this because it looks like someone might be passed out and somebody is getting medical treatment, some kind of treatment from medical personnel. I can't say what's wrong with the person, but it is hot out here. It's very humid. The sun is beating down on us. We try to find shade when we can, but it looks like somebody is laid out getting some sort of medical attention. So we'll keep an eye on that. But again, if for anyone out today, just kind of being mindful of the heat and staying hydrated and taking breaks when you can. Over to the left, that is kind of like the bigger group that has begun moving around this park. But they're staying in this area. This is about their second or third time coming around the park. And so we've not seen them begin marching on the street. So we'll keep an eye on that. But speakers are still on stage speaking here. It's still a large crowd. I mean, I would say several thousand are still here. The energy is still high despite the heat. And that is what's happening here in Fort Worth. We're going to keep an eye on things, and we will send it back to you.
All right, Adriana, thank you for that update this morning. And I know you've been out and about for a while as well, so hopefully you're able to stay hydrated and avoid some of the heat too. Thankfully, we're not in July. Although I mentioned earlier the heat index right now, about 103 with 59% humidity, according to the weather section of WFAA.com. And there you see the marchers in downtown Dallas. You mentioned earlier, Morgan, that they are coming up on City Hall, at least from this vantage point.
Yeah, and we're unclear if they're continuing to walk. It looked like when we got a different shot, trying to see if they're going to make another lap. You see some people kind of continuing past, and then just a few folks kind of trickling off. But it looks like they might be making another lap here in downtown Dallas. Here's a different viewpoint. You can see people, continuing to walk. We're seeing so many different signs here, and this energy continuing as people are continuing to move.
Yeah, you saw a sign there for, all persons get due process. That's been a big sticking point in this debate over the mass deportations. That argument that folks who are undocumented immigrants who are here illegally don't get access to due process, although time and time again, the courts historically have found that yes, you do. And how do you determine if someone is here legally or not if you do not grant them due process?
Absolutely, and signs kind of similar to that, mentoring democracy and so many things that we celebrate here in our country, and so many people feeling that is threatened, and we've seen that really echoed on a lot of the signs we're seeing here as well.
And we're seeing quite a few American flags as well on this Flag Day, June 14th, which coincides with the Army's 250th birthday, which is why the big parade is scheduled for Washington, D.C. tonight at 5:30. I want to remind you, you can stream those festivities right here on WFAA Plus if you keep it here later on today. And there's quite a bit planned for those events.
And do we have a minute to talk about Minnesota? Because I just,
Sure.
You mentioned this earlier, and we know that these demonstrations are taking place all across the country, except for in the state of Minnesota, where the governor recommended that there be no demonstrations after tragedy against a lawmaker, well, two lawmakers. I believe one lawmaker passed away and her husband.
Yes.
And another lawmaker and his wife in critical condition.
And there is a report that authorities there found a target list in the suspected gunman's vehicle that mentioned several Democratic lawmakers in that state. It is worth noting the balance of power. Governor Tim Walz is obviously Democratic, but the balance of power razor thin in favor of the Democrats there. But I think regardless of how that investigation plays out, it does speak to just the back and forth, the political divide that we have seen here in not just recent months, recent years, I think, and is part of the reason why you're seeing some people take to the streets for the first time.
Yeah, and it makes you really, grateful that, for our communities, that we are hearing the reports that in other cities it's been peaceful, and we're seeing, ability for people to peacefully protest.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier on our stream that I spent many years living in Los Angeles and have been in touch with some of the friends that I still have there about just the events on the ground. And they indicated that by and large, where they were, they didn't see any evidence of the unrest. But all you need to see are a few cars burning, a few interactions with law enforcement that go sideways. And that creates, it creates a narrative that there's massive unrest, but it also just contributes to that perception of the divide, the idea that this is not the America that we want to see. So again, that call today from event organizers, law enforcement, and officials that things stay peaceful. And so far, at least here in North Texas, that's what we're hearing. Well, there is the look from downtown Dallas of the No Kings rally, marching now, kind of doing a loop among some of the streets in downtown, making their way near Dallas City Hall. We've been covering them in Arlington, in Denton, in Frisco so far this morning. There are others planned throughout the rest of the day, but we're going to take a break here on WFAA Plus, and we'll come back with some more coverage in a bit. But again, so far, I think so good, at least in terms of unrest, Morgan.
Yeah, it seems we're giving you a look at those signs. And as Mark said earlier, we want to give you a good idea of it. I think we just had one pass by that may not have been safe for TV. We are doing our best. Our photographers are doing our best. So forgive us if you see something that's not great. But we just want to help you understand what is going on in downtown Dallas right now.